Hey, anatomy students, virtual students, I'm ready to start a new chapter. So I should have attached, or I will attach, the fill in the blank notes for this chapter on Google Classroom. Just like we did last time, fill them in as we go. I'll have some stuff highlighted you might want to highlight, or especially stuff in red. It could be good test questions someday. So we're going to start. Going to dive right into tissues. I'm not going to spend much time on cells. I think we cover cells really well in Bio 1. So I kind of skipped over that chapter, and we're going to go chapter 4 and 5, which is tissues and also skin, which kind of goes with that. So let me look at this next slide and show you what I'm talking about. There are basically four types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous, as you see there on the screen. Epithelial and connective is what we're going to highlight in this chapter. We'll hit muscle later, we'll hit nervous later. So we have whole separate chapters on those two. So I'm just going to kind of hit the main points of those and just kind of scan through them, and then we'll come back to them later on. So when you study tissues, the definition of tissues, that was your question of the day yesterday. I don't know what you guys put, but they're organizations of cells. I think a lot of you put groups of cells doing the same function, which is a true statement. But what we're going to throw in there in anatomy is also the intracellular material, the fibers, the unformed gel, the fluid. That's kind of how we classify tissues, is what is that non-living material in there, especially the fibers. Fibers will dictate a lot of times the function of those tissues, thus the classification of those tissues. So that's kind of what we're going to really focus on in this chapter. Histology is a study of tissues. We're going to do it sounds easy, but you have to be able to identify tissues according to, what do they look like? So we're going to do a lab where I'm going to have my students look in microscopes at different tissues. I'll send you those pictures, actually what you see. I'll take a picture through the microscope with my cell phone. I'll send you those. And then we have a little quiz over, classifying them. Is this squamous? Is this, I know it's a weird word. Is this blood? Is this bone? So we're gonna go through that in notes, and then we'll have a little virtual lab on that as well. Histology is not the most exciting. This is not the most exciting chapter. You'll find that out. It's kind of boring in places, but really, really important. Histology, a study of tissues. You take that to the next level, which is pathology. Where they take a biopsy, they take a tissue sample, they put it under a microscope, and that person, that pathologist, figures out, oh, this person has a bacterial infection, they have a viral infection, they have, cancer. That's when histology becomes extremely important, is when we start looking at disease tissues, and we start looking at, what's making a person sick. Really, really important part of a hospital setting, the labs that do pathology. I have a cousin that does that, and it's really, really important. And he always tells me, hey, I'm the first person that figures out what's wrong with them before any doctors can do anything to them. So that's what we're going to be doing the next week or two, is being histologists. So let's kind of look at the basic definitions of these four, and then we're going to look at some epithelial first, and then we'll finish up the chapter with connective and skin. Is what we'll end up with. So epithelial specializes in movement. As you know, your skin does a really good job of being a barrier, protecting us against things. And we take that for granted. When that's removed, the biggest problem we have with burn victims is infection. That's what usually kills a burn victim, is they get infection from getting their skin removed. So super important that it serves that protective barrier. And we'll talk more about that coming up. That's the first thing we're going to go over. Connective is pretty self-explanatory, connects the body, ligaments, tendons, things like that, holds the body together. A lot of variety in connective tissue. That's probably the hardest one, because you got everything from blood, which is the fluid, to on the other end of the spectrum, which is bone. So you got solid and fluid, and then a lot of stuff in between. So connective is probably the most diverse of the four tissues. You're going to see that as we kind of go through connective tissue. And then we're going to hit muscle up later. We already talked about the three types of muscle: visceral, smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. So we're going to circle back to those later. And nervous tissue is obviously your brain, spinal cord, and the part of your body that communicates. Okay, so let's kind of start with, where do these tissues develop in a baby? Okay, so the question for today, which you guys probably won't know the answer unless you watch this video before you answer that bell ringer, about 2 months after conception, pretty quick. And let me explain this a little bit. So when we start out, we all know is a sperm and egg, and then those cells start rapidly dividing. When they get to a big glob of cells, goes from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. When we get up in that 32 range, we get a big glob of cells. We call that a blastocyst. And that blastocyst is going to start differentiating into different types of tissues that's going to basically be with us the rest of our life. And this has to happen before we can get the organs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, spinal cord. All that stuff's going to develop soon after that. So when you look at this, let me show you a slide on this. I have to scroll down here because if I click my link button, I'll lose you guys. So when you look at an embryo and how it develops, we're going to look at some very early stages. So let me spend a little time if I ever find that slide. Give me a second here. I apologize. This takes a little time to scan through all my different, must have went by it. So when a baby develops, an embryo, so we're talking soon after we got this big glob of cells, you're going to get some space that develops. We call that a coelom. You can see that on the screen. That's this kind of space here. That's going to be your chest, your abdomen, where our cells or our organs are going to develop. And you can see on the outside, we're going to lay down some skin, some epithelial. Then the mesoderm is the middle layer. We're going to lay down some more tissue. And then on the inside is the endoderm. So ecto's out, meso's middle, endo's inside. And you'll see this yolk sac. A lot of people don't know this little tidbit of information. What keeps this baby alive before the umbilical cord gets hooked up and the mom starts feeding and nourishing that baby? That's a yolk sac. So that yolk sac will get smaller and smaller and smaller as these cells use up the energy in there and get all these tissues and body spaces intact. And then we get organs start to develop, and then we're going to hook up the umbilical cord, and the baby's going to kind of take off in growth and development. You can see kind of look like alien pictures here. Doesn't take long. This is 9th and 10th week right here. So you can see that baby starting to form. All the tissues and organs are starting to get in there. So it goes really, really fast. And I'm always amazed that we go from a 2-celled organism to that, an embryo that fast. That's kind of crazy stuff, okay? So what is in these layers? And, we've seen these prefixes before, ecto, meso, and endo. Ecto, we talked about morphs. Ecto just means outside skin, meso, middle skin, derm, and endoderm, inside skin. So if you have any doubts when you take my test over this, put epithelial because they're in all three. So we literally line our cells with epithelial on the outside, our skin, the inside linings of our body cavities, the blood vessels, the organs. We're lined inside out with epithelial. So it actually is in all three layers. Nervous tissue is also in that ectoderm layer. And mesoderm is epithelial, connective, and muscle tissue. So those layers are going to start to develop in the middle. And then the endoderm finishes things out by producing some more epithelial. Okay. So that's just basically the embryonic period. So that first, couple months of development, and then it just progresses from that point on. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's kind of jump right in. And I want to kind of just introduce epithelial tissue to you today. And then I'll do some more videos tomorrow, probably several, and start linking them up. And you probably notice I'm pretty much trying to just do my lectures just like you were sitting in my classroom. This is the stuff we went over yesterday and today. So I'm kind of putting 2 days of stuff together, which I often will do with you guys. So